Bohl. Bohl is going to be talking about reporting climate change, and Flo leads user experience at Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And this talk will cover the New Energy Finance's annual report on worldwide climate scores and how they've made the report accessible to a broad audience online. So here's Flo. Well, I'm going to switch over to you.
In my talk, I'm going to tell you why you should be thinking about climate change positively. And I'll tell you why left-wing activists were wrong in what they believed should be done. But before I begin, a bit about myself. My name is Flo Bohl, and I work at Bloomberg New Energy Finance, as Jen just said, in user experience. My work includes conducting viability studies, user research, usability testing, and drafting wireframes, amongst the other usual UX things. Unlike UX professionals elsewhere, I'm not involved in visual design, however. Before I started in UX, I was a visual designer, and long before that, a front-end developer. Even though I'm not a consultant anymore, I can't but help but notice that at the end of the day, this is the closest description of where I sit in the business. I have no formal authority and act as a trusted advisor within the product department, advising on strategic and tactical opportunities. The head of product luckily listens to my advice all the time because the team has a background in research themselves, so I don't have to work very hard selling the value of research, but actually working very hard on conducting the research myself. So that's very good. Now, the main questions I'll be covering today is, what's the context of climate change? And the context to where the work sits of the climate scope report. What are the behavioral aspects to trigger action? And how do you make complex thinking accessible to a broader audience? You can feel free to tweet me at Flo Bohl for any questions during the talk. I'll also try to join Slack afterwards, but let's have a look at the context first. Every year, Bloomberg New Energy Finance publishes a report we call Climate Scope. The report looks at carbon emissions and what emerging nations have achieved in investment in renewable energy. Why renewable energy? The most carbon emissions come from power, heat, and fuel generation. Reducing carbon emissions is not possible without reducing emissions from fossil fuel power generation. I have led the user experience research for the report's website. The political discussion around climate change is also a very interesting one. A week ago, obviously, Donald Trump had yet another interesting thing to say about climate change, and that is that ice caps are at a record level. Now, it's a very interesting claim. And this time around, it's not actually fake news, but he's right. They are on a record low level indeed. And you didn't have to wait long for Stephen Colbert's response. Stephen Colbert is a comedian in the US who's running his late show. And he said, under Trump, everything white will do great, obviously. Other political barriers is lacking political will or conflicting political agendas. A good example is Poland. It wants to be independent from Russian gas imports, and this is seen as more important than tackling the wider global problem of climate change. That's why they've invested heavily into coal, which they have lots of to generate their own electricity, rather than importing gas from Russia or wind from Germany. So there's a lot of wind energy being generated in the north of Germany, but it's very difficult to distribute it to the south where they need it. They could give it to Poland, but Poland rather votes for independence in energy. Voters in Poland are simply more scared of Russian influence than climate change. Now, there are plenty of good stories to be told as well. The Climate Scope report states that investment in renewable energy is growing globally and even massively in some countries like Mexico. Investments there jumped fourfold from 2016 to 2017. To give you some context, in 2017, large wind farm projects in the US and other countries cost between 600 million and 4.5 billion. These sums for only a wind farm are hard to finance, even for larger developers in the US, but it's a lot harder for a developer in Mexico. And yet, In Mexico, from 2007 to 2016, 15 billion was invested in renewable energy. Why does Mexico invest so much? Geopolitical factors such as reducing gas imports from the US may be one factor. Another factor is that renewable energy has become one of the cheapest forms of power generation. But belief in the need to tackle the problem of climate change is certainly part of the reason. Let's look at some of the behavioral aspects. Now, governments, organizations, and individuals started to act on climate change, and yet extensive efforts to educate people on carbon emissions and its relationship to climate change have not led to significant shifts in behavior. Now, what are the aspects influencing behavior? A study on behavioral aspects on climate change by Dr. Elise Amel states that behavior is influenced by internal forces such as emotions, beliefs, and attitudes, but also external forces such as social networks, cultural etiquettes, and habits. According to her study, it's meaningless to point into the future and say it's a long-term problem that might affect a few generations after us. Instead, to meaningfully influence behavior, she points out that climate change discussions need to be framed as matters related to current impacts at the local level. Another aspect that has proven to be ineffective in inspiring actions against climate change is using fear or guilt. Where fear breeds uncertainty, guilt makes people less confident. Anger, on the other hand, has been a very effective emotional trigger for action and is widely used in politics. Anger instills confidence. However, anger is very dangerous an emotion, and angry people are more likely to put the blame on individuals rather than organizations or society as a whole. Anger simplifies people thinking. People switch to rules of thumbs like ban all fracking or very simplified slogans. A simplification to the problem like this can certainly not be a message Bloomberg would promote. Unlike Bloomberg News, my department in New Energy Finance doesn't sell an opinion, but the rational analysis of a problem. So what are effective aspects to change behavior? Individuals play a critical role in inspiring collective actions within various spheres of influence. This influence takes place outside in as well inside out. Inside out is an example like a person has influence on its social circles like friends, family, which again influences wider circles in organizations and larger communities, which in turn influences the public's consensus on a topic, which over time then eventually becomes culture. Germany is a very good example. If it was for the German government, nuclear plants would continue to operate, but it was the action of many people who believe this is an unsustainable method of electricity generation, which led to the government to eventually agree to phase out all plants. Germany now has strong anti-nuclear culture, and whether that's good or not is debatable because as a consequence, now Germany generates more power from coal than ever. But that's another talk. You know, nuclear is zero carbon. Coal is probably the dirtiest, well, it is definitely the dirtiest way to generate electricity by far. But obviously, the reverse works as well, where culture works its way down to the individual. As a German myself living in London, I have become much more English in my behavior, at least according to my friends back in Germany. I have become more polite, basically. The saying goes, Germans are too honest to be polite, but Brits are too polite to be honest. So I'm not a very honest person anymore. No, that's just joke. Not sure I agree, but you get the point. These insights on behavior we watched we watched and observed to use to better communicate achievements in renewable power investments and carbon emission reductions. Now, what was the outcome? Let's have a look. This is how it started. A team of analysts sifted through amounts of data fairly large on renewable energy investments in over 57 emerging countries. They created their report and published it. The challenge then was to make complex data accessible to a wide audience, and this required us to strip down the message to a very bare minimum. Why? Because you really only have one shot for users who aren't that interested. You don't get a second chance. So I had to ask a lot of people about their opinions and what they thought about the report and what mattered most to them, and came across this killer insight from one user who wasn't particularly convinced. But before I share this insight, I'd like to reiterate the purpose of the research. Widen the reach of the readership of the report beyond Bloomberg's clients and beyond people who already believe in the cause was really the purpose. To connect to a wide audience on any topic, people who already believe in the cause, and beyond, you have to be approaching the research with an open perspective that doesn't come across as exclusive or elitist. So I don't have to necessarily agree with every perspective, but I have to be able to empathize. I have to understand the different points of views to make observations that go beyond my own understanding and beyond my own assumptions, to understand why a person acts the way he or she does, or an organization or a government. I cannot be too prejudiced about my own perspective. There's an incredible power by not being too dogmatic, but to listen to all views. This is the ultimate power for any type of research, whether it's user experience research or research on the energy industry's impact on climate change. Now, here's what the user said. He said that I don't care much about climate change, but I would like to see if my country is doing well in your report. And I asked, doing well compared to what? And the user responded, doing well compared to similar countries. So this led to the development of our main assumption. He gave us this clue that the aspect of comparison might be a valuable feature to engage audiences. And during usability sessions, this assumption turned out to be valid. One of the principles we adhere to in our work is progressive reduction. Progressively taking away functionality over time to improve focus on the main features. So we took out most features that stakeholders thought to be valuable and focused on the aspect of comparison and country ranking. The aim was also for the website and report to relate to the core aspect of opportunity. Now, this is how readers perceived the message. Humans, in most of their history, used to adapt to their environments to sustain their lives. Now the environments transform to the needs of humans. Basically, it turns everything upside down. If all this power comes with unanticipated negative side effects, a report like Climate Scope helps to imagine what could be done if the effects are actually desired. In other words, if we have the power to radically transform our planet by accident, there's lots of opportunity to be deliberate by deliberately trying to transform it in a way we desire. If we accept that we can't be here without massively affecting our planet, we just have to take it as a positive. All right. Let's conclude some of the aspects I said. Now, did the report and the website achieve behavioral change? Being able to compare countries on a comprehensive ranking puts pressure on governments. Why does it do that? Because the report is read not only by the public and political institutions, but also by investors and every government really has a vested interest for its country to be seen as an investable and well-performing in any ranking, really. And reactions of governments from countries that fared well in the report were overwhelmingly positive. So the message is clear, it's inspiring, and it achieved its goal. So why were left-wing activists wrong again? Justifiably worried about climate change, they have communicated the wrong message all along. If they were interested in people taking action in tackling climate change, they should have communicated it through the lens of opportunity. This has proven far more effective in inspiring action, and the belief to make profits through generation of renewable energy has led to huge investments. This is how we have given people a reason to become interested to follow our reports on climate change and read our reports on Bloomberg New Energy Finance in general. Thanks. That concludes my talk. Please feel free to tweet any questions to @FlowBohl or follow me on Medium for slides or other material. Thank you. Please feel free to tweet any questions to @FlowBohl